All right. Hello there. I don't know if you guys can hear the music. Hopefully not. But, hi. So, welcome to Monday Night Modding. This is a series that we used to do on the channel pretty regularly, every Monday almost. It's been a while, but we are back. I know it's not technically Monday, but Friday afternoon modding sounds much worse than Monday Night Modding. Here, I'll see if I can turn that around. There. I don't really care if it's slightly audible. I just want to make sure I don't get claimed on this. It shouldn't matter that much. I don't think the ad revenue is going to be that high. But still, better to not have it. But yeah, so we are going to be working on some Thrawn's Revenge and Fall of the Republic stuff. You can see we've got the Visual Studio open here. So we're mostly going to be doing Lua. But right now, I actually need to test something in game. So I'm going to launch that. So we're probably going to be working mostly on some resource-related stuff. The main thing is going to be making it so that we can actually earn resources. The ship crews specifically. With the other ones are mostly set up. It's just ship crews that we have a way to spend them. We don't have a way to actually get them yet. So I'm going to be stumbling around trying to make that work. But yeah. Usually I've got pox on these with me, but no pox today. We'll probably do a couple more over the next couple of weeks potentially. There's been a lot of stuff with squadrons that has been busy. But I want to turn... Empire War should go up here. There we go. What's going to be the fastest to test in? I guess we'll just go to Thrawn campaign. Because right now I just want to check that the influence modifiers are actually applying from the resources. Minus 4, that doesn't... No, okay, that makes sense. So, for whatever reason, these values aren't normalized properly, so it's actually a decimal. I think it's like 4 point something, and it gets... That adds up to -9, so that's something I need to fix. But it looks like they are applying to the planet, so that's good. That's all I really wanted to check right now. We have no plans for Death Troopers right now. I'm going to try to answer some questions from the chat as we go, but it's going relatively quickly right now. Jesus Christ, 130 people watching this. What is wrong with all of you? Why was the Duskin League playable in the past, but it's no longer playable? Because there's a limit of... So there's a limit of 16 faction slots, essentially. The 17th faction slot, if you invade a faction that has that slot, here, I'll go into the faction files. So here we have, I need to go into TR, data, XML, factions. So let's scroll her up there. So each of these entities is the code for a faction object. So these objects have all the information about those factions that the game cares about. So all the text information, all the specifics about them. And there we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So the way this works, these 16 slots work normally. If you have a slot here, so if you have 17, 18, 19, 20, or 21, when you invade those factions, there's a chance the game will crash. And this is something that we didn't know when we were setting up the the initial factions. If you played in early 2.2, the game would actually crash sometimes when you were invading the Duskin League. We thought it was a bug with their coding, but it turned out it was a bug with the game. And any faction you have in that slot, that'll happen. It seems to be an issue with assigning certain values. If you have anything over 21 faction slots, the game crashes on startup. We sent Petroglyph the crash logs, so we're kind of hoping that maybe in the future they will they'll be able to fix that. It's very unlikely that they would, but that's basically why that had to be cut. That's another reason, because I did the video on the plans for the future factions, where the Errata Authority, which are actually huts, is probably going to be replaced eventually when other stuff becomes playable. And it's not about playable factions or not. Any faction, and like, it's not about number in the GC. It's the factions in the code for the factions in this file right here. You guys can't see that I'm actually pointing in the real world at the right thing, but for you guys, I guess it's up there more. But yeah. What's the difference between normal EAW and debug? The debug exe gives you helpful information when you're running. It is laggy as shit. You really can't play in it. But if we open this guy here, it tells you a lot about like what's actually going on in game, and if there's an error. Like, this is from when I was testing something else. It tells you about like syntax errors. It tells you about like errors with unassigned values or values that are doing the wrong thing. Where is the other one? Is it log file? Yes. And this is the one that tells you like pretty much literally everything that's going on. This is where a lot of our testing for our scripts ends up having to be done. But yeah, we don't have a release date for 3.0. Don't think Petroglyph are able to work on the game. No, Disney has nothing to do with it. Disney would be the people who own the publisher now. And the patches that we got in 2017 were because Disney and EA allowed that to happen. Without Disney and EA, we were never going to get those patches. But yeah, so we have the resources coded in. The main thing I want to do is make it so that there is a way to add the resources. So we will need a new function in here. I need to make sure that I don't do this in a way that Pox will be upset about. So do I have this as requiring... What does this require? Heat-Dummy Lifecycle Handler. Should it require Abstract Resource Manager? No. Should Abstract Resource Manager require it? No. The asserter is something that's being worked on for the future. But, okay, so we want to have the resources actually assigned in here. No, this should call a function in there, which means this should be reliant on this. So let's open the init file, which tells it what's going on there. Dependencies. This currently has no dependencies, so it needs that, which we need to make it dependent on, what would its name be? Resource Manager, I think, is just the plugin. So we're basically telling this resource manager that it also needs to know about what's going on in here. Right? Might be the opposite way around. I really wish Pox had put in a way... Because Pox put in a way to remove resources. Yeah, so this needs to call the other one. Let's open up Combat Power Monitor and it's in it. key dummy lifecycle handler because it's telling the key dummy lifecycle handler to do stuff. Okay. All right, so we need that, and then CTX. Resource manager. I'm also going to open the key dummy lifecycle handler, which is here and here. Because this is okay, so that's just the name we want that to have. And then resource manager. So now we'll need this up here. This needs to now reference that. And we'll do it. I guess we'll need, yeah, we'll do it there. There we go. That resource manager goes there. Any plans regarding super weapons like the Galaxy gun? Super weapons are basically going to happen once we have planetary revolts and influence more fleshed out, which will be a thing in all the mods. No, don't do a full list of ships, Nemesis. I'm going to show off some of the stuff in instant action in a bit, but to take a break from some of the coding. But I am going to do like a New Republic preview video. That's there. Category filter. What do you use for? All right. So those exist now. And is that used for anything? All right. So now we need, Pock is going to be upset that I'm not doing these, but I don't understand how they work, so I'm not going to do it. Is the RST done? Yep. So we are going to want to, I'm going to just piggyback off the pilots first for this one for a second. Abstract resource manager, cruise, and we're going to want to do that. So this is basically telling it every week it's going to calculate how many new resources we need of each part, and I'm just going to do that. Self ship cruise. There we go. So most of these resources are, this is called the abstract resource manager, because these are typically the resources that it's fully dealing with are the ones that you're not directly spending. They impact influence and some government mechanics, but they're not directly a thing you're using, so they're more abstract. But we're also using it to, right here, just because it makes more sense this way, to set the ship crew increases, which is a resource that you actually directly spend. And I'm just going to use the pilot income for that. So ship crew income, we're going to keep the pilot academy and the cloning facility. Cloning facility is going to stay there, but we don't want that. And so now we want the resource manager. How does this actually directly work? What are you dependent on? Nothing. Influence manager, influence service. Let's open that because I think that's dependent on abstract resources. Self.abstract resources. Okay. There. And now I want to find that function. Base resource. Oh. Add resources. Income. End. All right. So we want WS resource manager. So it's resource manager. Add resources. Income. There, which I think should pass that over as the thing we want. Yeah, so that'll get into there. And self.ship crews equals ship crews plus income. And this should be relatively simple for that because this is just going to be a function that takes the ship crews and adds the new number to it, wherever that's coming from. Let's see. How do the ship boarding shuttles work now? Right now they're the exact same as before removal. We may change some elements of how it works, but its reintroduction had nothing to do with that. All right, so we have those resources now. And then with that, on production queued, do we need to return there? There. I think we do need to notify that because this remove resources only gets called there, and then that refreshes it. Yeah, I think that happens every time. Yeah. So we need to add the resources, which we did. Then we need to refresh the planet dummies and notify that it changed, which that should all work. Should. But I guess just to make this simpler, I'm not going to do the pilot academies. No, I am going to do the pilot academies. We can test it more easily that way, actually. I'm wrong. All right, so we'll launch that now, and we'll test that out, and I'm going to change the song, which I can barely hear. A Boo Bear. Well, eventually we want to change the targeting to use the tractor beam ability. Like, you can't make a new ability per se, but because we're not going to be using the tractor beam for anything, we can use that as a targeted thing, and we can get that information so people will be able to directly choose the ship they want. Uh, when we're making any feature like this, there's like the ideal design that we'd like to have, but then there's also the reality of what you're able to actually do in Empire at War that we have to deal with, and we have to make choices in some areas on like where is something worth having enough that it makes up for some of the downsides of what we're doing with it. Uh, why can't you make a new ability? Because Empire at War is not fully moddable. Only certain things are moddable. So you can't make like a bunch of new behaviors for ability. You can only piggyback on the existing stuff and make its casting an indicator for some Lewis scripts to do stuff. But that means you don't get to choose like whatever targeting paradigm you want. It's like the boarding shuttle ability is activated actually by using lock S foils, and then we have to get the location around the ship to figure out what the intended target might be. But if you want to do something like a targeted ability, we basically have to use the tractor beam exclusively for that, and then search for ships that are under the tractor beams, like currently under target by tractor beam, and use that as an okay, this is being boarded. But because you're then doing that universally, then you can't do that and also have the tractor beam ability. The mod does not support multiplayer Galactic Conquest, so it is not a surprise that it does not work well. Let's see. This will probably crash. Yeah. Resource manager, resource manager. Oh, do I need to require? Nope. I feel like I didn't do this properly. I mean, I obviously didn't do it properly overall, but what did I fuck up? Oh, this, we actually don't need this. Because we're not, it doesn't really matter what's going on with the planet. So that's one thing. Resource managers, resource manager. I'm calling that that. Target dependencies, type target dependencies. Function, return abstract resource manager. All right. Let's see. It's going to be something fucking stupid, isn't it? Here, let's check what we've actually done. This was already different. Abstract resources, init dependencies, resource manager. resource manager. Then the name is the same, right? I didn't fuck that up. Where is the tr plugins, install plugins. Electrical resources. Okay, so it's all there. All right. I'm doing a lot right now to avoid launching the debug build, so I think I may as well just do that. You ever use these streams to stay productive? I know they're doing work in front of someone helps. Sometimes it kind of varies. Like, it's not necessarily the most productive I could be with working, because there's also like trying to explain kind of what I'm doing. But it makes it less monotonous sometimes if I'm doing something that I think is going to be boring. And it also helps like sort of explain how the mod works and maybe show off stuff in a different way than normal. So just something kind of fresh. Let's see. Did I... Hold on. I think I know what I did. Did I do something? That? Nope, that doesn't require that. No extra requires what we need there. Ship crews, self-ship crews. Add resources. Add resources, income. All right. Human player planets, dummy lifecycle abstract amount. Human player planets, dummy self CD. Two, three, four. Well, that's 2 from CTX, so self isn't really important there. I feel like I messed it up in this area. But this is what the debug build is. It's just pure lag, but it gives that information. Let's just do Thrawn campaign still. Does the storyline in Thrawn campaign end if the New Republic captures deep space when you give? They shouldn't be able to get there. I think the mission isn't set up properly right now, though. Oh, are you fucking serious? Was it working? Was it just that thing I changed? I think that was it. Shit. Okay. Yeah, that's the last mission as well. Do you recommend Python or Visual Studio for Python is a language, and then Visual Studio is like a kind of a development environment. So you can do Python, you can code in Python in Visual Studio, but if you're doing like Empire at War stuff, then you'd be working in XML and Lua. Like you can use like Notepad plus. I really like Visual Studio Code. It has a lot of useful plugins, but they're like Sublime's pretty good. There's a lot of options. It really just ends up being whatever kind of works for you. Right, so did that actually work then? And right now, the helpful thing is that this information on our pilots is going to be the exact same as what we're getting for ship crews. So let's see.
Building started.
We're just going to get pilot academies.
Constructing.
And see if it crashes on week change. Hey Rhino, how's it going? Okay, cool. That actually worked.
Updated.
Let's see. Was that the right amount? Yep, fighter try. Okay, cool.
Construction complete.
So we are now able to actually have an income of ship crews. And everything is working. There's a few places we still need to optimize all these scripts.
Construction complete.
From the combat power tracker, which is the thing that spawns these defensive structure, or spawns the space stations based on defensive structures, which is basically what gives the AI an idea of what they're attacking. The filters got moved. Yeah, so these were moved down. There was going to be something else that was going up here, but then we changed our minds. These are all going to be combined into one button, though, and this will be scaled back up. So you'll only have to press one thing to turn on all of them, because it's very rare that people only want some, and then it kind of just wastes UI space. But we are making fighter pilots, training fighter pilots. That's helpful. That's handy. Let's get
beginning construction.
Industrial parts and
Beginning construction. Building started.
Food production, industrial.
Building under construction. Constructing.
I just want to see if we end up in better shape with our if the resources end up making more sense. So is this update going to be a massive overhaul of the entire mod? Pretty much. Like, there's less focused on specific combat reworks, because that happened with, like, the basic balancing happened in the last couple releases. But there's going to be some more ground overhauls, but a lot of the focus has been on some of these Galactic level mechanics. And that'll continue to be the case until we're done with this particular release. Will the resources limit the number of units you're able to build? When you are building units, you will need to spend ship crews. The other resources aren't used directly in buying stuff. So ship crews function similarly to credits. It's just the way you get them will differ, and it gives like ships different kind of metrics that they can require. I'm not sure why it's freezing like that. I think it's something with the combat power monitor. but that's one of the main bugs we need to figure out right now. All right, not sure what's going on there. No, you'll be. No, resources have nothing to do with being able to spawn fighters directly. It's they come out of your ships, but when you do that, they cost pilots when they die. This doesn't the fighter pilot resource doesn't change how fighters work in terms of like where you get them. Food and industrial parts, as I explained earlier, they tie into influence and government mechanics. So I think that's the combat power stuff that's doing that. So basically the way it works is your influence on the planets depends on, like, you need to supply your planets with food and industrial parts. Planets cost different amounts of that. And if you are taking too many planets too fast, but you're not building up your economy to support that, then those planets will be less happy with you. Your influence will be lower on all your planets, and you'll be more likely to have revolts happen. And if you're rushing too fast, you're getting too many of your pilots killed off, then you won't have any pilots or any fighters in future battles. So you need to keep up your fighter production, because carriers are such a low risk strategy. They're super good all the time, and there's nothing really, like, if all your fighters die in a battle, there's no downside to that. You just retreat, come back, and it's all there. Let's see. Let's start Thrawn campaign again. So fighter pilots, if a fighter dies, then you lose a pilot. All right, let's see if that was related to any of these being finished. The week tick over is always going to be a longer freeze because that's when all the stuff gets calculated. But it's the during the week stuff that we're trying to figure out where that's coming from.
Log updated. Construction complete.
Oh, the CI. I assume you mean AI. The AI isn't built into those systems. No, that would be a lot for the game to keep track of, and the purpose of the system is to make the player have to manage more on their planets, not just blitz through the game. If we tried to make the AI require it, then they would be really stunted in how they're able to progress, and they wouldn't provide anywhere near as much of a challenge. So there's no reason for them to really be bound by it. All right. CIS. The resources you'll have will differ by faction, but the food and industrial parts are standard. CIS may not end up being limited by pilots directly, but they'll have their own other stuff. There will be some like faction specific stuff with resources. Okay, I think this is happening at the same time, so that might actually be a problem with the Thrawn campaign. What happens if you have 0 pilots? Then you don't get fighters. One sec. Yeah, the Fall of the Republic and Thrawn's Revenge releases will probably be a couple weeks apart at least, but they won't be super far off. And everything going to one is going to the other as well. Thank you, Revenant, for the $25 donation, a third of the way there. That is correct. I will have to do my green screen shenanigans soon, hopefully. Just kind of bummed the game is going to become so radically different on the Galactic level. I mean, the Galactic level, for the most part, is just a menu to get into battles, as it is in the base game. And there's nothing that stops blitzing or punishes blitzing. It's always the best strategy that players have to do, and there's not many ways to kind of work in mechanics like planet destruction without them being meaningless buttons to skip ground battles, for example. So we want to add more context to what's going on, give the player a reason to go for different planets over each other, and that's kind of what these resource mechanics tie into. That's what their purpose is.
Mission log updated.
It allows us to do more with the government mechanics, the story mechanics, make each faction kind of feel different, make each planet more unique and feel different, rather than just being pointlessly steamrolling through the galaxy, or where it doesn't matter, like, why would I go for Coruscant over somewhere else? Is it just like a pile of credits? Like, if you play pretty much any other strategy game, especially games that are based on like a strategic overworld, then they tend to have more than one resource. And Empire at War has only ever had credits. And it's hard for us to put in different story rewards or story events when the only thing you can get out of it are snowballing in the one resource type, rather than make it something that helps your faction a bit more than maybe others do, or like maybe one faction wants to go for a certain planet more than the other factions do. So that's kind of what's being done there. Okay, there we go. That's fine. And I'm going to do this. Dursteel. And we can close that. We can close that. I wanted to get back. We don't want to do those changes. Let's see if we can find the... Here we go. So these are, again, planets will have a... some planets will have positive or negative impacts on your resources. So say if you take Coruscant, that's going to take away 10 of your food production. If you take Yukio, that's going to add 10 to your food production. So if you're going for Coruscant, then you need to make sure you have the economy to back that up. So that's basically what that kind of does. It's like the XR85, a different resource tied to them, so they don't need food or... No. Crews only apply... Like, again, food is not something you spend. The only resources you spend are ship crews for spaceships and credits. Ground units don't take ship crews. Space units do take ship crews. Food is something that is impacting your influence. It is not something you are directly spending. I'll go in game and I'll show you guys again what kind of goes on with the resources, with each resource that's currently in. Because again, you are not spending every resource on units. Most of them impact your planets and government management. Most do not factor into what you are directly spending. So let's go back to Stars Align, just because it loads in quicker. How will you know Coruscant negatively impacts food? Because the planet ability icons on the Galactic map are going to be repurposed for those modifiers. So there will be icons under the planets that say when they give different from usual resource impact. But as these explain, for food and industrial supplies, those are our first two resources we're looking at here. And this is what a typical resource will look like. You have your income and your expenditure from planets and structures. And then based on how much you have, there will be an influence modifier based on that. So that impacts this number, which impacts stability of the planet, whether it wants to revolt. So you have, if you are not producing enough food or enough economic supplies for planets, they will want to leave your faction. So you need to be careful of how fast you expand while not watching those things. And then you have the more directly related to your unit's resources, first being pilots, which are trained from pilot academies, some planets, cloning facilities, and those are used when you are using fighters from ships. So if you lose fighters, you are losing your pilot resources, and you want to not do that. If you run out of pilot resources, then you won't be able to spawn pilots. Normally, if you're building like even a relatively small amount of pilot academies, you're going to be fine. But it's there to make sure that people aren't like overly reliant on carrier spam in factions where they're not supposed to, and just a way to kind of nerf a strategy that is a bit overpowered and has no real drawbacks or costs to using those units. The other resource is ship crews, which you'll get from academies, from planets, same kind of thing. But these are resources that you actually directly spend on units. If you don't have enough resources to build a specific ship, it will not show up in your build bar. So those are basically how the currently included resources work, and then there's going to be others like Tabana and certain storylines. There will be like Bacta as a resource. and it'll vary by faction. So the CSA's government mechanics are going to be more based around that. And it adds more to the galactic level for you to have to think about when you're expanding, so that you're taking the right planets, you're not expanding too fast or too slow, and you're thinking about which planets you're taking when. It's not going to be like a huge skill cap. Like it can seem like a lot when you're not used to that, but think about any other games if you played like Total War or whatever, where you have a couple of those economic buildings. It's just to make sure you're not like steamrolling your way through, and that you're actually using these planets for something, and that you have to think about using certain things like planet destruction super weapons. It makes way for certain events that can mean new factions show up on the map. Like if Corellia revolts, then you have to deal with the Corellian faction coming into existence, that kind of thing. One pilot per squad. It's not going to be like, because we could multiply it by 12 and it would work fundamentally the same way. It's just harder for people to think of that way. Droid, we aren't sure if we're going to tie the CIS to it. We probably are, and just have it labeled as like a note that droid fighters still count towards that. But that depends ultimately on how we end up wanting that to play out. We may disable it for them and have that be part of just like one of the unique things for the CIS, that they can spam it out. We haven't decided on that exactly yet. But let's see, what were we going to do next? I wanted to add a cost to one of them. So I'll actually push this. There we go. How do you and the team decide on who to add as units or heroes? How do you decide on Locked Dirt but not Dark Reaper when they're both secret new bad guy that good guy stops before it's used? I mean, the defoliator isn't actually in the mod. Locked Dirt is independent of that. That would be one difference between Locked Dirt and the Dark Reaper. Like, Dark Reaper requires specific assets, isn't really something that you can represent super well in Empire at War, especially when we're trying to avoid super weapons until we have these kinds of systems. Because otherwise super weapons just become kind of bullshit with no downside. Like, there's no reason not to blow up a planet in Empire at War with the Death Star. Once you've got your own planets built up, then you just bounce through the galaxy, destroy the planets, and you're kind of done. But this is another one of the reasons that we're doing stuff like Influence, is because then if you're bouncing around the galaxy blowing up planets, other planets will be like, hey, maybe I don't like that, and will be more likely to tell you to fuck off. You showcase the Empire Warlord government mechanics? No, we haven't yet. We're still working on legitimacy. Is it possible to upgrade featured New Republic ships to upgrade old Rebel ships already built into the newer modern ships? Most of them don't really work like that. Like, they didn't upgrade those ships. You just build the new ships. Like, Coronas replaced Nebulon Bs, but they didn't upgrade Nebulon Bs into Coronas. So you research the ships to unlock them, but you don't necessarily directly swap them out like that. But so, like, the considerations for units and heroes tend to be a mix of like assets, how prominent are they within the story, how much sense do they make for a specific GC, even sometimes just how much do we like them on an individual basis. Will supply lines matter? No. There may be some benefit to having like trade ports on connected planets, but that kind of information is difficult to track on the galactic level. And like, again, there's only so much depth we can add to the game. What was I doing? I was going to check the game object library. We were going to assign a cost to a unit. So the ship crew costs are standard amounts. So let's go back to the dummy-based resources. There are different tiers of cost that a unit can fit into. It's not something where we can give like any arbitrary amount because it's based on buildings that are kind of spawned hidden in the background to let us know how much stuff things have and things cost, because that's the only way we can lock them out. We can't like just add in a new text field and say this takes however many. We have to kind of gimmick it, which is why if you can't afford a ship, it stops showing up on the build bar. So these are all actually dummy structures, but we wanted, let's do ship crew tier 7. I think that's how much the ISD is supposed to be. Unless it was 10, I forget. I think it was 7, but just to show you guys kind of how this works. So we go into actually core saga, data, XML, units, capital, template Star Destroyer, is required structures in here. Okay, so that we have that set specifically by by mod. So that'd be tr, data, XML, units. Generic Star Destroyer, capital category dummy, then we make it also require ship crew tier 7. How do you plan to balance all the new scary things given to a villain faction like the CS in comparison to things given to the good guy faction? That doesn't really factor in, like, the factions. I'm not really sure what you're asking there. The balance doesn't really change based on them being good or bad. Just what's the intended purpose of the ship, and then like the cost and the population capacity is based on the direct capability of the ship. There's no real consideration given to like, is this a unit for a good guy faction or a bad guy faction, or trying to make one better than the other or scarier than the other, because ultimately like the player can play as either side. They have to be balanced properly against each other. Are we getting a mod with the First Order? That would be a different mod set way in the future. Right now we have 3 mods on the go already, with like the next thing we do would probably be Imperial Reign, which would be a GCW mod covering both Legends and Canon. And that's a lot of projects already. If we did a First Order mod, it would be after that's established. So it's that, even the team being the size it is that would be too much for us to do right now. And we also want to go into game object library. So that was in here. I want to make sure I'm in TR, scripts, game object library, Star Destroyer, and where is that cost? Library. Ship crew requirement. Equals 30. Do you think the engine can handle ramming ships? No. There's no good way to do that. You can't really have stuff moving between different levels, and collision detection is shit in Empire at War. So basically, there's stuff moving on different layers vertically, and you can't tell stuff to move like up or down, just around. And even if you had everything on the same level, you can't really tell stuff to collide with each other, and the collision detection isn't really there for it. You basically have to have little invisible hard points that are doing damage to everything around them, and it'd be a huge mess. There are some mods that do that and then have like an animation when you press an ability to like make it like zip around, and it looks really weird and doesn't work super well. And that's like the closest you can get to actual ramming in Empire at War. But yeah. Republic class Star Destroyer is in the mod, yeah. Just making sure. All right. What will the next news post be? I'm probably gonna do one tomorrow with some of the New Republic stuff. But I'm about to show you guys that right now anyways. Some of that. How do you get a Republic class Star Destroyer? You wait for 3.0. So let's see. Art of War? Sure, why not? Empire. Have any new factions been added in the last 6 months? No. It'll be a while before the next playable faction's in. I don't really play Arma 3. I have Arma 3, and there are some other devs that I used to play with a bit. But I really only played when they were playing. I don't love the game, to be honest. It's mostly a walking simulator to me.
Planetary control achieved.
Any thoughts to eventually connecting the eras together in one massive mod? That wouldn't really work out. We'd have to cut so much content. I kind of explained at the start of the stream how faction slots work. You can't have those other factions in without cutting the same amount of factions, so every era would end up being worse individually. And you can't, like, having a single GC progress through all the periods doesn't make much sense, because like how do you go from the Clone Wars to Rebellion? When the Clone Wars end, the CIS is dead. Then do you just have the Empire, or like the Republic form the Empire but then break up into the Rebellion? But at that point, why not just make it so that it's a new GC? Like, you're functionally just making it a new GC, and if you're making it a new GC in order to make there be enough slots for all the factions and for the story events to make sense, then you'd may as well just have it as another mod. That's why Fall of the Republic and Thrawn's Revenge are different mods. That's why we didn't put them together. Because you end up not really getting much value out of having them all in the same place. Like, it may sound cool to people in their heads to be like, oh, I can play a single GC through all the eras. But when you put that into practice, it really doesn't end up meaning much. It's just like, oh, I've taken over the whole galaxy. Oh, now everything's gone and I'm starting again from scratch. And you can't really balance it back. Like, oh, they have millions of fleets already. They'll just steamroll again. It doesn't really work out very well. Will more hypothetical events be added to the Empire, like choosing not to have ISAR leave the Empire? Yep, there's some era reworks coming. With Arrow 1B, for example, you'll be able to choose between Central Committee of Grand Moffs and ISARD. And there will be some ways to skip certain eras. But right now, the focus is just on recoding the era the air system to get like the basic framework as it is now, but in a cleaner framework that allows us to modify stuff better. I don't know exactly how long that'll take to get to
Beginning construction.
the point where that's done and ready to have other stuff done with it. So we want to make sure we don't screw that up. Like we're probably not going to delay the mod just for that. Did I not have the filter fix in here?
Constructing. Construction complete.
Someone break it again. Oh, nope, never mind. Just not spawning immediately for some reason.
Constructing unit.
See, that cost us the 20 crew resources there, and now we can't afford them, so they're gone.
Unit cancelled.
But we cancel it, we get our crews back, and now they're back. Would you ever make an Old Republic mod? You mean, would I ever make... Would we ever make? Is there any way to improve pathfinding? Why is it so bad? Not really. It's just, it's bad. It's gonna be bad.
Constructing. Construction complete.
Let's see, do I have other forays just sitting around? A lot of these assets are old in placeholder, but we've actually started getting some movement on these guys. Like the hammerhead and the foray have been redone by 3 coal and terrible.
Mission log updated.
And Max is working on the Sith interdictor, but I haven't heard from him in a while. I don't know how much progress has gone there. Obviously, our focus is on, basically the way it's going to work is TR 3.0 and Fall of the Republic 1.0 are going to come out.
Choose your
And then
reinforcements.
while they're in testing, we're going to be focusing a bit more on Revan's Revenge and starting to get work going on that, as well as something else.
Cancelled. Reinforcements cancelled.
Seritzel is working on the Inexpugnable, which right now is like the old AOSW model. And I'm probably going to finish my Auric that I did, but we do have the Sith Fighter that Terrible made, and 3 coal textured in there. Because I did an Auric model just for a video a while ago to record it. So right now we're using the AOSW one, but I'm just going to texture mine, and we'll use that one. But yeah, there's that. Go back to TR now. HK-47's in yet. The heroes that are already in are like Karth, Bastila, Revan, Malak, Nihilus, HK-47, and I think there's someone else. Can't remember. What happened with interdictor technology? Like the Old Republic had it. That's weird lore stuff. Technically, I don't think the Sith interdictor was like an interdictor. but it was more like the general meaning of the term interdictor, and then I think it turned up in Tor as like actual interdiction technology, but it wasn't really supposed to be around until later. It was weird. Then that usually gets retconned into like how complex the technology actually is, but let's check out some of the new stuff. Take a break from the coding.
Updated.
Revan's Revenge is not a placeholder name.
Enemy forces ahead.
That was in the last build.
Upgrade in progress.
Can't show off everything new because it's
Upgrade complete.
not all in instant action yet. It's not big enough menus, but we got basically in the previous release all the Mon Calamari stuff was redone, but now pretty much everything else from the New Republic's been redone.
Upgrade
The new class stuff. So this is the new Majestic. There's also the Defender, which we can't pull in because it's not on the menu. But there's the Corona. Oh yeah, that does happen in KOTOR. I might have to go into GC so we can build some of the other stuff. But we have like the Defender, which is the Majestic, but with hangars, essentially. And yep, ship crews are coming for 3.0. That's basically what we've been working on this stream. All the basic resource stuff is... We got a Sasheen coming in.
Upgrade complete.
Thank you, Moses. Hey, Corey, just want to say I'm really looking forward to these updates, and I appreciate all the work you and your team put into them on. Well, thank you very much. Glad you enjoy it. There's the Sasheen. I'm not playing as the New Republic, so I can't tell them where to go. But there's that. So, like, pretty much all the new class stuff has been redone. Davis was actually working on a Nebula and Endurance model that we're probably going to end up using, though those aren't in-game yet, so those are still the basic ones. Connor did a new Assault Frigate. He just finished the texture, rather. And like a Saratzel did the model, Connor did the texture. I'm still rigging that, or I haven't rigged that. But we've got the mini baby Viscount.
Upgrade complete.
So the way this will work is you'll do the Viscount research, and that'll give you the prototype. That'll be available as early as Era 3. And then once you've done the research, you've got the little baby one, you'll be able to build the larger like Bounty and Krakana version,
complete.
which is the one you guys would be used to from the mod. That guy. So they have the New Republic gets a few more options for battle cruisers as they go on. We've started working on some of our initial like Legacy of the Force era stuff. So first off, there's the Mediator, which is one that was kind of introduced at the start of the Vong War. You'll be able to research that. And you'll have this guy. So these designs are by a Saratzel. There's no official depictions for them for the heavy carrier we're out to look at in the Mediator. But Saratzel did the models there. I think the textures for these were Mr. Puerto Rican based on Bob's materials. But there is the Mediator, and then here's Blue Diver.
Upgrade complete.
This is the Mon Cal Heavy Carrier. So these are things that you'll get through research. There's going to be a lot more research stuff that comes in. Let's see. Just go to Empire's End, New Republic, and bump that up. So I want to get the other new class stuff if we can. Will there be anything to show KOTOR and SORTOR content take place during each part? So you won't be progressing between KOTOR GCs and Tor. Both will be present in the mod, but they won't be connected, and like you're not gonna play from one to the other generally, unless there's something specific done. But for the same reasons that we wouldn't combine other eras, it just makes more sense to have them as one mod because it's at least more continuity between the factions, and we don't have to represent quite as many things. But like there will be KOTOR GCs is the first thing we focus on, KOTOR and KOTOR 2, some Mandalorian War stuff, and then also some Tor stuff coming later. Any plans on going back to Stellaris? Yeah, I'm going to do another playthrough in
Construction
Fallen
complete.
Republic. Probably as the Mandalorians. I tried recording a couple episodes of the one I was already doing, but my units pathed into a planet that had one of the 75k stacks when I started a war, because I didn't forbid the passage to the planet because I didn't realize that was a thing, and it ended up being very sad.
Constructing unit.
So I really can't. That was basically a playthrough ender. It would have been several episodes to rebuild from that. I would have lost a bunch of stuff in the war, and I was too annoyed to continue. All right, so we'll get the Defender or the Republic there.
Building under construction.
We thought of making a mod based on movie 7 through 9. A sequel trilogy era mod would be like
Mission
5th
log
in
updated.
priority, depending on how stuff goes on other things. We have some assets for the period that may be released as some mods individually for existing stuff, but right now our priority is finish TR 1.0 or TR 3.0 and Fall of the Republic 1.0, and we'll start on some Revan's Revenge stuff. Obviously, we're still going to be doing more for TR and Fall of the Republic after that. After that, the priority would be on Galactic Civil War stuff if we were to make another project, and then it would require those getting somewhere. That's when we'd probably do a sequel trilogy mod. Here we go. Let's get a Defender.
Vehicle in production. Vehicle in production.
I guess we'll get one of those just because people haven't all seen that.
Unit in production. Vehicle in production.
All right. I answered why the Duskin League was removed at the start of the stream. Basically, there's not enough faction slots. The game doesn't allow infinite factions, so we had to remove them. So if you scrub back to closer to the start, I think that's like the first thing I talked about when it was asked. At what point will ICW be considered complete? When we get bored of modding it, or when it stops running.
Moving at those coordinates, sir.
There's no such thing as a finished mod. Will influence change depending on the faction? For example, will the longer to get Mon Calamari to like you if you're playing as the Empire of the Warlords? There are certain planets that have certain preferences for factions. In the release version, for example, it's just Kashyyyk that we did that on. But like there will be different setups for that. I'll see if I can open the policy repository. This is the ICW one. So, for example, their like of you may change based on who is your chief of state as the New Republic, for example, which faction you're playing as. If you're not the New Republic, Kashyyyk likes you way less. You get a similar thing with Mon Calamari. Obviously, they're not all set up yet, but they're all going to vary a little bit. Is there a plan to include scripted missions, sort of like an Era 3's campaign with the attack on Coruscant? Yep, there will be more of those. They just take a lot of time, and our focus with scripts has been on other mechanics recently, or for the last long time. But we have more active staff now, so it's easier for us to get some of that extra stuff done.
Majestic cruiser standing by. We're moving out.
Possible policy making decisions like civilization, sort of. There's some places where that kind of thing is going to be done, but like we're never going to have the same amount of depth as like Civ or Total War does with government stuff, but we're doing basically whatever we can with Empire at War. So yeah, we do have some of the options for the Chief of State here on this bottom row. We have B-Wing E research, which upgrades your B-Wings. We have Lusankia.
Enemy fleet approaching.
Sasheen cruiser reporting.
And this is something, I won't say anything about this. This is something that Jorit's working on right now that helps handle the New Republic's heroes, which is related to Chief of State and government stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of that kind of thing coming.
Tactical battle imminent.
Which new faction has the highest priority?
Unit
Technically, the Hapens do, but there's a lot being done with the Empire of the Hand that is also resulting in work being done on the Chiss, and there's some stuff being done with the Hutts as well. So functionally, it could end up being either the Chiss, the Hapens, or the Hutts that ends up being playable next. It just depends on when certain stuff gets done. With any new faction we add, we want to make sure that they have at least a certain amount of, and here's the research for the Viscount and Mediator. But with any new faction that gets done, we want to make sure they have sufficient units for ground and space when they become playable,
enemy fleet
as well as
approaching.
at least their basic implementation of the government mechanics.
Tactical battle imminent. Tactical battle imminent.
Gravity control generator destroyed.
System lost.
Yeah, the Chiss Ascendancy wouldn't have any Imperial stuff. The Empire of the Hand, small subset of Imperial stuff is represented in their heroes and some starting units. They wouldn't have been building like Star Destroyers and stuff. And there's enough Imperial factions in the mod.
Enemy fleet approaching.
Alright, let's go to December with this, I
Moving to
guess.
coordinates.
Tactical battle imminent.
What are your favorite mods for AW outside of TR and Father Republic?
Tactical
Phoenix
battle
Rising and
imminent.
Stargate.
Gravity
Pegasus
control
Chronicles.
generator destroyed.
System lost.
It would be interesting in the era change between Thrawn and Dark Empire. If Thrawn is still alive, could there be contestation of power, similar to Father Republicans using Palpatine? There'll be certain ways to like skip certain eras or have them work a bit differently. We wouldn't try to have like Thrawn and Palpatine split off.
Enemy
There
forces ahead.
would be a chance for maybe Thrawn goes back and joins the Empire of the Hand in that situation if he's still alive, or something. But we wouldn't
Sasheen cruiser
make it so that we're
reporting.
like directly fighting each other or
Choose your
anything.
reinforcements.
Right,
Order
Republic,
confirmed.
Moving there now.
Sheen, Defenders,
Headed there now.
Majestic,
We're moving
Corona.
out. Moving out. Quick as a blaster.
This map isn't super great for showing anything off, but this is kind of the New Republic toy section.
Star Destroyer standing by. Moving to coordinates.
Can you lose the last Pegasus mod playthrough? Yeah, you're basically supposed to lose
Star
with that
Destroyer
one.
reporting in. Order confirmed.
I think they've changed some stuff in the balance that I didn't really
Engaging the
agree with.
Picking up signal.
But
Yes,
with that, you
Commander.
are kind of meant to
Y-wing squadron
lose.
reporting.
And a lot of the
Starting
story
my
events are built around you losing, and you
Awaiting
get pushed back to Atlantis.
We've got them on scopes.
Rendezvous at Mark 6.1.
Our primary engine system is
Yeah,
down.
there's the Hajin as well, which is
Our
a
gone.
fleet tender. So this the repair
Awaiting
stuff.
your orders. Coming around.
But I don't have one of
Awaiting
those
your
right
command.
now.
Attack commencing.
Enemy fighters.
And now you
in
can watch the New
range.
Republic lose.
Stay in attack formation.
Our lasers are destroyed. We've lost the iron
Prepare for
cannons.
jump to hyperspace.
I'm running out of maneuvers.
Is there a process that goes into choosing which planets to have them on? Again, it's basically the same kind of thing as like Heroes, where it's whatever's relevant to the most relevant to the period or to the specific conflict that GC is meant to represent, or whatever's most relevant to whatever factions are in that galactic conquest. So it kind of works in that order as well. Like there's a certain baseline of planets we need for each faction for them to be viable, which that needs to happen. So those get chosen. Then there's the ones like Coruscant or something, which is always relevant to the broader galaxy, or Bilbringi, which is relevant because Battle of Bilbringi is obviously a major Star Wars thing, so we need that in the progressive ones, but it wouldn't necessarily show up in like the if we did a campaign built just around like taking down the Arido Authority, it wouldn't be in there. Then there's like we need a capital shipyard for each faction and some access to a super capital shipyard within a reasonable number of jumps or whatever is deemed reasonable for that faction. Like that wouldn't be a consideration for the Empire of the Hand, and maybe we'd want the Greater Maldrud to be a bit farther away from one. So that all, except for like Mon Calamari or Hast. So that all, or just Mon Calamari Hast isn't level 4, but that kind of factors in. And we try to keep it within a certain size for each one, because otherwise bad things would happen. You're really adding the Moffrins as an alternative to Ice Heart, or the New Republic get a Robo later? Yeah, so the era, I'm going to see if I can pull that up for you guys, but the era system is being recoded. So first off, we're just going to be trying to put it into the new framework, but the eventual look for that will be some different events and stuff and some different branches. Here we go. I'll just pinned it. Just gonna open that for you guys. This has some of the research stuff in it as well. It won't be super legible maybe, but I can at least go through what some of it is. And this has some of the basic story stuff on it. And there will be some factions that don't tie into the eras quite the same way. Some events here like Dark Nest Crisis use on Long Invasion, which have a minimum time that they can start at. But you can see here. How do you feel about sacrificing gameplay for graphics? Gameplay and stability will always be the main thing. Like, if you put in too many assets, not only will it lag, there's more of a chance for crashing. And like we've increased our polygon limits a fair bit recently, as well as some of the basic texture resolutions. But we've also made cuts in like shadow meshes which don't need to be as high poly. So the end result is that our models are still, even if they are much higher poly, they're less prone to causing lag when you're bringing them in, less prone to lag when you're actually using them. But when it comes to stuff like rotating turrets, that is such a drawback both to graphics and, or like, it's purely graphical, and it causes a lot of gameplay issues in Empire War, because like they always orient left, and then it's a huge CPU drain on top of just being the visual issues. So if we ever did something like rotating turrets, that would be a submod. But yeah. But yeah, so here's the chart I was talking about. And on this side, we have the New Republic research. So Borsk can become the chief of state at any point, which allows you to research the Bothan assault cruiser at any point, but it also defaults to just opening in that era. Everything, instead of having eras being like split between 1 and 1B, everything's kind of separated in its own era properly now. But here's the one we're talking about, where this is the kind of core of the era system. It's always the Imperial leader. You have to play through. I've noticed that buildings, especially turbos and shields, are noticeably cheaper. What's the team's thought process behind that? Those aren't infrastructure. Pricing hasn't been done yet. They're just the basic price that it has right now. But that'll be more in flux as we go through. But yeah, so these are the different progression types through the main series of Imperial leaders. The Legacy of the Force stuff is right down here. But so we have, I think it's like 11 technical eras, but you don't progress through them all the same way. They're more like, these are the ones you're directly progressing through. The Imperial leader. You guys can't really see my hand in the right place, obviously, but it helps me explain it. So you're progressing through different time periods, but you're also progressing through the different Imperial leaders. There's a bit more of a disconnect between that now. Like, you're not killing Pelion, then killing Pelion, then killing Pelion, then killing Pelion to get from Pelion to the Vong War to Dark Nest to Legacy Force, Fate of the Jedi. This is more based on what era you choose to start in. So there'll be like a time passage thing that allows certain heroes like Jaina and Jason, who would be too young otherwise, to show up, where you need to be in a certain time period for that. But for the most part, like, you don't need to hit the end of Pelion's era to get to the Vong War, or you don't need to hit the end of the Vong War to have the Dark Nest crisis happen, or you don't need to hit the end of the Dark Nest crisis to have the Corellian insurrection happen, because like the second Galactic Civil War will be based more on Corellia directly. So for Corellia, for example, there's Imperial Corellia, which is what it starts as. Then that can exist as a New Republic vassal, or that can be conquered by the New Republic. If you have high influence, you can release them as a vassal state, or they can revolt after they're conquered, or they can just progress directly from Imperial Corellia under certain situations. Or if they're a vassal and they get pissed off at you, there will be an insurrection event, and then that'd start the Corellian Confederation as their own faction. So there's a few different ways to get that, which is essentially what is the starting point if you start in Era 10, I think this is. Or the Dark Nest Crisis, you can have the Killix be active and the situation in the galaxy be what it was in the Dark Nest Crisis if you start in Era 9. But the Killix would be an event that have a chance of happening there's some RNG elements to it, but there's also some elements based on how you're progressing through the game. Killix ships are essentially broken up asteroids with some modifications. Any plans for lag mitigation after a couple of weeks? It tends to get laggy. We're doing as much as we can to optimize the game, but it's a shitty game if you have a bad CPU, especially. There's not much we can do there. It can only run on one core. So make sure you have it if you have like a 2.2 gigahertz processor, it's going to lag. There's nothing we can do there. If you have a base speed of 2.2 gigahertz that's supposed to boost to 4.7 or something, then the game won't make it boost automatically. You have to make sure it's doing that on your own. Those are some of the best performance tips we can really give. But yeah, so back to this. The huts, for example, they wouldn't really factor in, even though the huts kind of became more active as a military faction closer to here. If you're playing as them, there will be some research you can do or some actions you can take to switch the government type. Or if they feel especially threatened, they can become active as the Hutt Empire. Yuuzhan Vong invasions, kind of like the Dark Nest crisis, where based on certain actions you're taking, they'll have a chance to invade at pretty much any point after Sate Pestage's era. So they won't be invading immediately. If you're like blitzing the galaxy, you'll probably have a higher chance of seeing them. But there'll be some ways to get an idea of when they're showing up. So you'll have some prepping. Like again, there's no specific speed that will give you no lag in Empire War. If you're playing a large galactic map, you're gonna have lag, and any features we add on the galactic level requires more computational power. It's going to lag some amount. It's just what is worth it for you, what's worth it for us for the features we're doing. There's not really we can't just change a line from like does lag yes to no. Like we have to either cut stuff or optimize stuff, and we optimize stuff as much as we can, but there's some baseline of lag that Empire War is going to have. There's not really much we can do there. But you're not going to be like trucking your way through to Era 5s just so you can fight the Yuuzhan Vong. They could show up independent of that. Because the Yuuzhan Vong don't really give a fuck what's going on in the Empire. These are the minimum era requirements for the research for the Republic stuff. And then the unit names are directly showing up when they become automatically unlocked. But you can start the new class modernization project in Isard's era if you really want to, or Thrawn for the RSD. It would automatically unlock if you start in Palpatine's era for that, and the units would automatically all be unlocked in Era 5 if you're starting down there. But if you're starting in any period up till there, then you'll be able to research them whenever you want, really, if you want to invest in it. But these are like Majestic, Rona, Endurance. These don't have all the unit names on it because that is expanded a bit. But it doesn't really matter which core you set the affinity for. And keep in mind it doesn't save it between sessions, so you have to redo it. But like especially on, we've tried to put everything we can in the week rollover. There's a hang in the middle of the week right now from the combat power monitor we're pretty sure that we're trying to get rid of. But like we try to make sure that all the stuff we add is primarily just doing stuff on week turnover. So there'll always be a bit of a hang right here, but that's when it's calculating all the influence stuff, all the resource stuff. And it's not really doing anything for the rest of the week. But beyond that, like having the AI be active, having a lot of planets, that alone causes a lot of the lag. So there's really only so much we can do there. Will Hutts or Corellians be playable? All the factions will have the chance to be playable once they're fleshed out enough. Anything that we give a slot to has the chance to become playable and is kind of picked because it would make sense as a playable thing. Boarding, I did a video on that a while ago saying that it will be. Boarding is back in 3.0. But yeah, so back to the eras. So you start off with Pestage. This fundamentally looks similar, but there's more ways to get between them and stuff that you can skip. So you can see here, let's go from Sate Pestage. You can, if you have an involuntary era transition, so Isard takes command automatically, just like in the mod currently. But if you do it voluntarily, you can either choose to support Isard, or you can choose to support the Central Committee, which gives you a different set of heroes, some different planet stuff happens. Isard will be on her own on Typhera, or another Imperial planet if you don't have Typhera at that point. So one planet will break off, at least. Isard will be in charge of her own little force, and he'll be in charge of the Central Committee, which is an obscure little weird lore bit. The AI will not be boarding, other than when they accidentally do with like Niles Farrier. If you go from the Central Committee, you can either voluntarily go to Thrawn, or from either of these, you can instead bypass Thrawn's era and go directly to Palpatine. So you can skip Era 2 technically, if you go directly in the Dark Empire stuff. If you go through Thrawn, there's some other story events related to that. That's how the Q-Trick Bake-Off happens, but you have Thrawn. If he dies, you get the Interregnum, which is the Q-Trick Break-Off, and then after the timed event, you go into Palpatine. Or, like usual, you can do the voluntary transition into Palpatine. If you are in Palpatine's era, you can voluntarily support Jax. If you choose not to, and you just do the voluntary or death transition the other way, you can go to Dala. The Empire fractures there, and there's some other resurgent warlords. So if Pterodok, the Erido Authority, Pentastar Alignment, whomever have been killed, they have a chance to come back with planets based on some of the Imperial territory. But you kind of have to really fuck up as Palpatine to do that. But you can either go from Palpatine to Jax or Palpatine to Dala, or you can go Palpatine to Jax to Dala. And then after Dala is just Pelion. So there's a bit more nuance to your options as the Empire as far as that goes. And some of this will tie into legitimacy. So if you have legitimacy is the Imperial's government mechanic, the core of it. So if you don't have enough control over your faction, you probably won't be able to do the voluntary era transitions. You kind of need to have everyone believing in your hype, drinking your Kool-Aid. But yeah. There we go. How are you going to make How are you going to search models for Legacy of the Force era? Because most of them are fan-made. We make our own assets, and when there's stuff that requires concepts or designs, we make them ourselves. So like the Strident, we have our own design for that Valerie made. For the Mediator and for the Blue Diver, Aceritzel made those models and designed them as he was going. There's like several known ships. There's a few that have their own actual designs from canon, but we fill gaps where we need to. And most of those rosters were actually fairly similar to earlier stuff. The big thing is just going to be designing the Corellian roster, because there's going to be a core of Corellian ships needed to fill their stuff. But we see some comp sets. Though there were a bunch posted on Mod Database of a lot of the Haven ships, the Strident, so you can look at those. But was the Providence TR? I can't find. The Providence was in the Greater Meldrude, but it's getting removed because, yeah, we're not looking for Corellian ships, Nancy. We're making Corellian. Like, we're not looking for other fan-made stuff. There's some designs in like the background of Dark Empire that we're going to be basing some of them off of, but we don't like go and try to find what other mods have done and try to take their shit. We design our own stuff when we need to. Like, what other mods have done has no bearing on what we're doing. Like when we designed the Mandator, we didn't look at like the Pride of the Core thing that gets thrown around in all the other mods. We don't reference other fanon. We reference what the original things are meant to be, and then we make our own designs based on that. Will the playable Vong have a similar government mechanic to influential legitimacy and match something like glory or something similar? They'll have, like, every faction's going to have their own unique thing. So trying to compare it too much to another faction won't get you super far. But the Vong, we won't really be thinking about their government mechanic for a while. We're still, the next one that we're probably going to be doing is the CSA. So it'll be like New Republic, Empire, then CSA, Hapens, and Empire of the Hand will probably be done around the same time. And then we'll start thinking about other factions as we add them. But the What was I going to say? Part of it also depends on like what the galactic lag load is at a certain point, so that'll inform how in depth we can go with certain things. Part of it is just what ends up being possible or not, because like the Chiss and Empire of the Hand stuff, and even some of the Haven stuff relies on certain things working that we don't have full information on yet. But the way the factions get introduced, it's basically they start off non-playable. They start off in their most basic form. So like the Yuzon Vong would start off as an invasion event rather than like a playable faction with however many units we have at the time. And then as they get fleshed out more, there'll be more options for us to make them playable, have them show up in more places. That kind of thing is, yeah. Why are some ships unbuildable in Infinity's game mode, i.e. Quasars and MC-80s? Because it's you just change your starting area and from the ground up, and if you start earlier, you'll get the earlier ships. Some ships from the Republic get locked as you go on because they got replaced and phased out. But you can just choose starting area and change stuff. I didn't mean to press the start button. Will there be any new Imperial Remnant ships, i.e. Asserter eventually? Yep, I'm working on the Asserter. That'll be done. There's some other stuff I'm working on first. I started a few years ago, but that was for something else, and then, yeah. How will Warlord government work? Because it never really showed us. So the Warlord governments are all the Imperial factions tie into legitimacy because they're competing with each other to be the legitimate empire. So all their factions, though there will be kind of like different nuances to each of them, they all work off the same basis of trying to prove they're the best empire or they're the main empire. And they can like draw heroes to them based on that, some other effects based on that. But that's going to be the case for Zinj, the Pentastar Alignment Empire, and Orion Authority and Greater Mount Druid, with some extra mechanics for each of them, just based on who they are. But that's kind of the core of it for all of them. What's the plans for ground units? There are several being redone, added. Max for capture, 2,200 meters is usually our cutoff for that. Empire of the Hand units can't be controlled in instant action. You can spawn units for whichever faction you want. So you just have to go to the main thing. Here, I'll show you.
Mission log updated.
We've located
Yeah, the World Devastator will be re-added eventually once we've made the mechanics for them. But like, you can just click on this guy,
Upgrade
and you can change who you're spawning stuff for. So there's the Empire there.
Upgrade
then
complete.
Now I'm spawning the Empire of the Hand stuff for the Empire.
Upgrade complete.
And you can control them.
Your command, sir. Heading to destination. We're moving out.
You can gain heroes from increasing legitimacy. Will some leave if your legitimacy lowers? Yep. So yeah.
Commander.
I think that's gonna do it for today, though. Which SSDs will the different Imperial factions have? The ones that they already do, essentially, like the Bellator, the Vengeance, the Executor, Sovereign, Eclipse. But if you want to see more of these Empire of the Hand ones, I am doing the Empire of the Hand preview playthrough right now. So that's a series that's going on the channel. But yeah, so I think that's going to do it for today. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm starting to lose my voice. We are going to be doing another stream later tonight. I guess I'll talk about the allied thing. So there are actual functions in the game for stuff being allied or not. The way we do it in Fall of the Republic is using corruption to fake the alliance between the CIS member states. But that obviously can only be done for one set of factions. You can't have different types of corruption because for forces of corruption. Corruption is corruption, so anything that has it will move through, and then that's a lot of AI types to manage. We are hoping we're going to be able to use the base game ally feature, like ally tag for factions. The problem with it is it causes a lot of instability if certain things happen, and certain things that people would expect to be able to do you can't do. Like, people would think like, oh, I can park this over my allies' planets and they'll get attacked and then we're all going to be defending together, but you can't do that. So we need to make some sort of script to handle it when there's allied units on the same planet, to like bounce them back or donate them. And so it remains to be seen whether we'll be able to do that how we want to do that. It'll be fairly complicated to make that function work, and the big question with it is always like, it's less about difficulty to make it work and more about difficulty to make it work and not make it super fucking laggy. That's one of the things that kind of remains to be seen, whether we'll be able to accomplish it or not, and that'll have a lot of implications for like the Chiss and Empire of the Hand or the vassal system for the New Republic. But yeah, it was like the corruption stuff was done for the CIS. If you play Fall of the Republic now, that's how they work. But the actual like using the actual allied tag is kind of the way I have them in the Empire of the Hand preview playthrough for the Chiss, is not necessarily something we'll be able to actually do. But yeah. All right. This is going to take a long time. No, it is not going to take a long time to come out. It will not take super long at all. Was Revan's Revenge? Yep, I did a couple videos showing Revan's Revenge off already, and we showed it off in the stream. We wouldn't be making all these assets if it wasn't real. But yeah. Okay, that is going to do it though. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you found this either informative or entertaining, or yeah. Have a good day. We will be back actually later tonight with the tabletop series with Shaq and Eck and Charlie and Wasted. So that'll be at, I think, 8 p.m. EST, so 6 hours from now. I'm going to go get some lunch. But bye, everyone. If you have more questions, you can join the Discord and ask in there, or you can leave them in comments, and I try to answer as much as I can. But yeah.